Odom is on a ventilator in a coma. Multiple drugs were found in his system, and there are reports he used synthetic Viagra.
Lamar, I mean, he lost his mom at 12 years of age to colon cancer. I mean, how can a kid go through that? And then his father had a substance abuse problem on top of it.
Lamar,
whoa,
you're on a journey.
yeah.
Try to just be with it.
And I told him I'd been preparing him for something big, the most powerful plant psychedelic known to man.
If you might set up a purpose, you might start preparing yourself.
They're getting in touch with aspects of themselves that have been elusive, very important aspects of themselves that probably account for some of why they're suffering.
He likely has suffered from chronic PTSD that has re-exacerbated over time as more traumas have occurred.
If I can help all that out with just, a treatment like this, then why not?
Hey guys, thanks for being here. I'm here with Lamar in Atlanta, and we're so psyched every time we see the movie or the trailer. It just brings back all of these different memories and experiences of the last 2.5 years. And I am very honored to have it screened here on Facebook and to have this great panel that we have. We have Ramin Parole from Science of Self. We have Ismail Ali from MAPS. We've got Warren Gumpel, the producer. We've got Chase Hudson, another producer. And here I'm with Lamar. And this movie really was a huge joint effort. In order to pull something like this off, it takes a team. And in that respect, we couldn't have asked for anything more. Just want to first start off by thanking Lamar for being really brave and letting us film, because, when somebody says, hey, I want you to try this psychedelic treatment, that's one thing, but to say, hey, I want to film it, that's a totally different thing. And I think Lamar knew that, hey, if he was going to take this step and it was maybe going to help him, that if it could help some other people, that was going to be, a really special, way to pay it forward. And that's really what's happened. And so as you can see from the film, this was a very organic thing that happened where somebody introduced me to Lamar, and he was in a place where he'd tried everything else. And he was like, you know what, I've tried it all and I'm willing to give this a shot. And, for me as a psychonaut, as somebody who's been involved with psychedelics for a number of years, I was pretty confident that these things were going to work in the way that they work in general. And I just knew that if Lamar had these experiences, that just having it was going to be the most important thing, just to, allow him to go inside of himself and have that experience where, he could come back out and try these things in his own life and put them to work in his own life. And like everybody who does plant medicine, I want to say that, myself included, you take the iboga or you take the ketamine, and then that's half of it. But then how you integrate that into your life after, that's just as important. And it doesn't mean you're not going to make mistakes and you're going to do things that, come from your past. But, when those things don't resonate the same, that's how you generate these changes in lifestyle and stuff. So I'm happy to report I'm here with Lamar. I've watched him work out every day doing boxing and run around LA, Atlanta, all over the place.
I'm a little tired. You guys have to excuse my red eyes. I'm a little tired from the Reborn run. But it's been fun. It's been fun informing the world that there's other ways that they can beat depression, and anxiety, and even addiction.
Let me ask you a question. What made you so brave that you were willing to let me film it? Because I understand you wanted to do the treatment, but where did you get the balls to let me film this thing?
I'm gonna be honest. Well, first of all, I'm a Laker, so right, always on First Street, and then been on a successful reality show with a successful reality family. So I think I was quick, Bill, and I'm from New York City.
Yeah. All right. Well, that answers that. Yeah, that's probably the only guy in the universe that would have done it. And done it as hard as he did, it would have been really easy just to do the ketamine and then say, yeah, I got something, but not to go to do the iboga, because we were telling you this is going to be one of the most intense experiences of your life.
With the iboga?
Yeah.
Yeah. I've done a lot of drugs in my life, not to be proud, but iboga was one high that I wish would stop when I was there. It was so strong, but it was worth it. It was worth it. It was worth it. It was a spiritual high. Just like I said about the ketamine and the iboga, it's kind of like the healthy high, if I could describe it the right way.
It's like you're having this major experience, but that afterwards you're getting all this benefit.
It's not for partying, or when you do other drugs, usually you're depressed when you come down on after ketamine and iboga. It's like a light on the inside of you is turned on. It's crazy. I felt last time my last ketamine treatment, I was just asking you, like, do you still feel it? That's why I asked you, because it's been 2 weeks.
You're still feeling it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's like the past like 3 or 4 days, I feel like.
Wow.
Like I'm ready just to take off.
That's awesome. Well, just so you guys know, Lamar, thankfully, he's been able to continue at the at-home ketamine treatments. He's in a KetaMD's beta trial, and he's doing these on a semi-regular basis. So usually with ketamine, you do like 6 treatments is the Yale University protocol. And then you do a booster as you need them, as the doctor prescribes. That could be once a month. That could be, once a quarter, whatever it is. But in this time that we're in, this pandemic and the PTSD that we have, I think, it's probably accelerated a lot of people. So in the last few months, it's been great. Lamar's been able to get a couple treatments. He has one coming up in the next day. And, it's like a refresh, it's like, that afterwards you feel like, wow, something's happening. I feel these neural pathways connecting, and then to feel it a couple weeks later, this is a miracle thing. And I think that's what this whole movie is about, is we really have some solutions. And during the pandemic, you've been hearing everybody say, oh, there's this, we have this problem, and these are huge problems, but these solutions are even bigger. And when you incorporate these psychedelics and the opportunity that they have for real healing as a medicine, I think this is what this whole movie is about. It's like, hey, let's get this information out because people don't know this,
Yeah, I think there's medicine to stop yourself from being a problem. Right? I think most people in the world are being held back by themselves. So hopefully we can help bridge that gap to people so they can be their best selves.
Yeah, awesome. And I think about what you experienced in the iboga, hearing your mom's voice, your grandmother's voice, seeing your son grow. I mean, those are like incredible things that if anybody who's lost a family member or something could access that, like I would want that for everybody.
It was extremely spiritual. Both of them, even the ketamine, you heard me saying that it felt like I went to heaven. I haven't been to heaven. That's what it felt like.
That's probably what it's like.
Yeah.
Well, let's turn it over. There's Chase Hudson's here from Hemp Lucid, and Chase was there with us the whole time and from the beginning, and he's had his own experiences of using these medicines, and did the iboga with Lamar that day, and is just back from 16 sessions of ayahuasca in the jungle. So Chase, maybe you can give us a little bit of a recap on where you're at and what's happened for you since this started.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, and it's definitely good to see you again, Zappy and Lamar. And yeah, it was a wild 2 years. Got introduced to ketamine, which introduced through this project, and I actually implemented a corporate health protocol using ketamine for all of our employees after seeing the effects that it had on Lamar and then some of our other employees. So ketamine's been a great tool for myself and our group, and then also other plant medicines. You know, we did the iboga down in Mexico, and that was a very, very intense experience. Um, some of the real positive things that came out of that was it broke my. I was never addicted to alcohol, but I came out of that experience and I haven't drank alcohol since then, which was about 2 years ago. And then, yeah, I just got back from a 1 month isolation, 16 ayahuasca ceremonies down in Peru at a wonderful center called Niue Rao, underneath a master shaman, Ricardo. And that was an unbelievable experience. I mean, I was able to heal from all the traumas of my past, my childhood, just daily traumas and stresses, anxieties that we all go through with the crazy world that we're living in currently. Um, had great healing physically, a lot of my neurological issues and pains that I was dealing with, all that was healed. Really connected to the positive emotions, so love, empathy, compassion, forgiveness, um, and I was able to free myself of the heavy negative emotions of guilt, shame, fear, resentment, victimization, and it's an exciting time. You know, we're living in the revolution of the awakening, and these plants are a big part of this great awakening that we're going through. So it's been great. You know, I'm super proud of Lamar and his journey and what he's been able to overcome, and I'm excited to see what's next for him.
Hopefully $1 billion.
All right, cool. How about, we also have some folks from Unify on here. We have, of course, Adil and his team who've been making this possible, and that has been amazing, their support and bringing the movie out. So why don't I cut to Warren? Warren, do you want to, Warren's a producer on the film, and Warren's been with it since day one, and we've all had our own crazy experiences on this road, but Warren, what are your reflections?
Yeah, I mean, this was, a very unexpected project. I think, we had met Lamar, and that was a real blessing. And I think Chase, Zappy, and I sat outside of, by the inlet in Miami Beach, and we sat and talked about this. And we always hoped for this day to come to fruition, where we were able to share this information that's just not available to the wider public. And, again, it's been 2.5, 3 years. And of course, making a documentary involving all of these different people and not knowing how it's going to end, or not knowing what the process is going to be, can be a bit jarring, and can be, fun and frustrating and difficult and exhilarating. But to have it actually out now, and people responding to it, and people taking action, and people who would have never heard what ketamine was or had negative associations, getting to see how much Lamar healed from that. And then people with addiction issues seeing what ibogaine is, which nobody knows, unbelievably, seeing that that's an option for them. And, I come from a place where ketamine healed me tremendously. I was awfully depressed and anxious, and, it kind of runs in my family. And I was kind of at my last stop, and ketamine saved my life. And then I was able to, be an advocate and help people learn about it. And then it introduced me to things like ibogaine, and I took ibogaine, and it's quite an experience. I didn't go in with addiction issues with opiates, but I've seen people come in off the street off of 20-year heroin addictions and walk out feeling good. And I think it's a lot of hope for, especially for this country, where people are suffering tremendously, and they don't think they have any good options. And thank God they'll be able to see this film, and at least a family member might push them to go down to Mexico, unfortunately, because it's not here yet in America. And this film, the whole point is to save a lot of people's lives. And I'm certain now, with however many thousands and millions of people that see it, is that the job that we set out to do, we're going to do. And that's just, for me, it feels great to be a part of something like that. So thanks, Lamar, Zappy, Chase. This has been, super fun, super terrifying. And I'm just very glad that we're at this point right now. And thank you guys for facilitating this conversation.
Yeah. So Ismail, maybe you could weigh in on, I know MAPS, of course, a lot of people know that they've gotten some incredible approvals for MDMA, for PTSD, but I also know that MAPS is behind ibogaine and a lot of other of these catalysts. And it's like, thank God, because what Rick Doblin's done at MAPS and all the people there over the last 30 years, this is why, all this stuff is coming to the limelight now.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much to say. And first, I'll just share some appreciation for the invitation to join. Thank you, Adil and Zappy and Chase and Lamar and all of y'all for putting this together. So I'm Ismail Ali.
Well, the pink out now.
I'm Ismail Ali, Counsel and Acting Director of the Policy and Advocacy Department. For those of you that aren't familiar with MAPS, we're the Multidisciplinary Association for Psychedelic Studies, which might win the award for most syllables in a nonprofit name. We're a research and educational nonprofit, which was founded in 1986, which has been trying to responsibly bring psychedelics into culture and society for over 3 decades. And as you said, Zappy, we actually just celebrated 35 years since Rick founded it. So we've been doing it for a while. I got to say that on a personal level, I actually lost my mother several years ago and have lost many dear friends to overdose and poison drugs and detrimental use of all kinds. So I really appreciated Lamar's story. I'm really glad that it's out there. I'm particularly grateful for the focus on trauma in the film. So much problematic substance use and mental health issues stem from trauma. In addition to societal determinants of health like poverty and other factors, isolation, lack of connection, like you were saying earlier, the pandemic has definitely exacerbated a number of these factors. So it's really good to contextualize not just the what, but also the why of what's going on. I think it's important to recognize, as I think we hear in the film, and some of y'all have already touched on, that healing is not a linear process. There isn't always a clear endpoint. Zappy, you mentioned integration earlier. I think this movement toward more responsible, thoughtful use really needs to come with this awareness of preparation, of integration. And this kind of work that MAPS is doing is, like I said, about responsibly bringing psychedelics into society, which means using them in a way that's, reverent and respectful and thoughtful of like the incredible impact that they can possibly have. They're not toys, they're not, and I like to say, you were mentioning, Lamar, how challenging it was. I like to say that psychedelic therapy and psychedelic healing is not exactly a fun process. You gotta excavate, it's not the same thing as being in a club and partying. And although, like you were saying, Chase, you can have moments of extreme joy and levity and so on, you got to work to get there. It doesn't just, happen like that. So I just appreciate that like kind of full spectrum approach. I think, Lamar, in the film, you also touched on the stigma of seeking mental health support. This is starting to change a little bit. Everyone's family has been addicted by addiction or overdose or mental health issues of some kind now. But just a few years ago, it was like kind of seen as this weird, edgy thing to even be thinking about therapy, to be thinking about working on your mind. So it's really critical when we're considering for us at MAPS, like how to bring this through FDA, bringing the treatment to people, to marginalized communities, Black folks, communities of color, people in rural areas. It's like, how do you overcome this stigma that has come with 50 years of propaganda since the war on drugs started? This summer is the 50-year anniversary of the Controlled Substances Act. So we are entering a new era where we're at. So I'll share a little bit more about some big changes about what's going on policy-wise later on today, but I just wanted to share that appreciation and put that framing, because like you saw Tom Kingsley Brown in the film that did some observational research on ibogaine. We're associated with a lot of folks who've been doing a lot of this research for some time. So seeing it come out like into the mainstream, into the public it's exciting, but there's a lot to hold with it. So.
Yeah, nice. All
Thank
right,
you.
cool. Yeah. And hey, Ramin, how about on the integration side? Because like we said, taking the medicine and going through that, that's 50%. The other 50% is you and what you do with that change.
Yeah, that's right. Thank you very much. Oh, there. Thank you very much for inviting me on. It's really wonderful to see everyone and experience this with all of you. Yeah, and that is the next 50% is that integration piece. It's really incredible how it's shown through the documentary that there is a door that opens, and that door that opens is so incredibly important because it gives an opportunity for an individual to see that it is not just our reality, that there's something more beyond it. And once we touch that place, then it's the integration back into our day-to-day that helps us to create sustainability. And one of the best ways to do that is through the rhythms of our breathing. Every time we inhale, exhale, it's an opportunity for us to remind ourselves that we are right here, right now, that we are safe and that we are grounded. So that's one of the most important things that we can learn is how to breathe. And for some, it's how to breathe again and just keep reminding ourselves again and again.
Very cool. Yeah, that's what it is. You got to, take it, and then you got to walk into your life every day and use these things that you've learned. And that's the challenging part, but that's the cool part. It's like they say, it's not so impressive for a yogi to sit in a cave for 30 years, but when they come out and then they walk in that energy, that's the important thing. And that, I think, for anybody who's doing alternative treatments like this, it's really important that you get the right integration. So Adil, did you want to make a comment? I know you've been a huge part of bringing this out, and what your unified network stands for is like everything that this film's about.
Yeah. First off, honored to be here with all of you. It's we've all been struggling and with the kind of an unprecedented experience of social isolation, social distancing. Some of us are distanced from our family, and it's we're seeing the highest rates of loneliness and depression and even suicide, right? And so it's our commitment with Unify is like, well, what do we do now? Like, what can we provide? And I think when we look back into our lives, it's like, we've all, sometimes the greatest challenges are sort of the source of some deep introspection and ultimately transformation, right? Plant medicines many people on our staff and on our team have been critical. Meditation, yoga, breath work, basically cracking this inner world and entering the source of that suffering. Most of us, feel it, and it's painful, and it's maybe even noise. I really encourage you to, if you're listening, to realize you're not alone. Like we're all going through this, and the real challenge right now is destigmatizing the challenges that we're all experiencing mentally with what's happening. And it's as you embark upon your own inner journey, it's like you take each step into yourself deeper and deeper. You discover more, you understand more, you ultimately begin to realize what's actually catalyzing some of these states of suffering and pain. And so I really, hats off to you guys at MAPS and at also with the films, Zappy, like hats off to actually having the courage to go public with this. It's kind of the sharp tip of the spear. You're breaking this open for all of us, and I know our viewers are all kind of interested to understand really a little bit about, like, well, what have you experienced exactly? Like, what is it? Look, maybe I hand this over to Lamar, but so what was, you kind of, we get a view on the outside, a little bit of what you were experiencing, but what was your actual experience on the medicines, and specifically in the ibogaine? You were mentioning it in the green room earlier, and I was like very fascinated.
About the ibogaine?
Yeah.
Well, both of them were extremely spiritual. Like I said before, when I first tried the ketamine, it had this extreme heavenly feeling. And the ibogaine, even though it hurt, it was worth the hurt. I had a lot of people who are no longer here, such as my mother and then, my grandmother, who raised me after my mother. I connected with them. I got to hear their voices. And my son, who passed away at 6 months, I got to see him at the age he passed away, at like 6 years old, and then the age he would be right now. So that was worth it, but extremely spiritual.
Those are almost impossible things to get any other way. There's talk therapy and all these things that have gotten us to here. And, now we have these new opportunities. I just want to talk a little bit about the science for a second, because I think this is important about ketamine. First of all, ketamine is been shown, it's an anesthetic, one of the most used anesthetics in the world. They realized when they were doing battlefield amputations, they realized that the people that were getting the ketamine for an anesthetic were not committing suicide, and the other people who were getting the regular anesthetic, they were having high rates of suicide. So they were like, wow, this is crazy. There's something here. Yale University studied it. And what it's the newest research is that you have this area of your brain called the default mode network. And in there's this little mechanism called your lateral habenula. And your lateral habenula is recording all the stress you've ever had in your whole life. And when it becomes too much, your brain goes into this burst mode. And when your brain's in burst mode, it shuts off your dopamine production. And your dopamine is your happiness, your motivation to do anything. You're getting none of that. Life feels horrible. The first time you do a medical ketamine treatment, it takes your brain out of burst mode and you immediately start getting the dopamine back. So we get phone calls all the time at KetMD where people are like, oh my God, we'll talk to the husband or the wife the next day and they'll say, they just cleaned the garage. They've been threatening to do that for 5 years. They just did it. Like, whatever you guys are doing, keep doing it. And really, it's just that the power of unlocking their brain and their dopamine. Then, when you do this 45-minute session of ketamine, you have this incredible present moment awareness feeling when you're in there, where all the chatter in your mind, it slows down and then it stops. And you're in present moment awareness. And that's a really incredible experience on its own. But in the hours after the ketamine treatment, it's metabolizing and building new neural pathways in the brain around trauma and depression. So this is the reason Cleveland Clinic called it a top 10 medical breakthrough. What I love about it is it's a micro crystal. It's not a plant medicine, but it's a crystal, like a salt. And where plant medicine, these plants have a lot of legacy, where they were grown, who harvested them, who brewed them. And when you take that, you have to synthesize that back out of your system. And the ketamine, because it's this uniform crystal, it doesn't have that legacy. And it means that the experiences themselves go really, really well and are really smooth. It never really goes bad, or anybody has a bad trip. And so when you put that together and you go, here's an FDA approved medication, it's 100% safe, and it works in these multiple ways that we understand. We just need to get the word out right now and share this with all of society so they can have the ketamine. No worries. And then the ibogaine, the technology, the advanced technology of this African root is incredible. To be able to break a heroin addiction, a meth addiction, alcohol, 2 packs of cigarettes, crack, whatever it is, to be able to break that in one session, this has to be lifted up on a mantle, and we all have to just acknowledge that this is an incredible opportunity from nature that we all should have the opportunity to jump into and take advantage of. And so part of what the movie is trying to do is really bring out the information, but at the same time to kind of raise the activism right now and say, hey, if these things are available, then people need access to them. Okay, like Ishmael was saying, 50 years ago, these were made illegal, 1971 by Richard Nixon. And he said, we need to study this for safety. We're going to make all these things illegal. Well, now 50 years later, all the millions of people have done these psychedelics. They've been shown to be safe, and a lot of people have had a lot of benefit from them. So we have to just step up right now and say, hey, we're in a crisis. We are coming out of a pandemic that has a lot of people with PTSD. We need to be able to access these. No excuses. We need it right now. And we're lobbying, the Mind Army is lobbying for legislation, an executive order to be written that we're going in there and we're going to basically go lobby just like the politicians do in Washington and get this stuff legal right now. Because this is, you can't have people suicidal and addicted and not give them a solution if it exists. So Lamar says in the movie that he thinks they should give these at every rehab treatment center.
Zappy, if someone wants to experience like a medically assisted ketamine journey, how do they go about and do that?
So you definitely want to do this with a doctor. Warren here, he's the CEO of a company called Ketamine that was really launched out of this experience with Lamar, because we knew that this day was going to come and hundreds of thousands, millions of people were going to want a ketamine treatment. So he said, let's make this as cost effective as possible. And let's try to, have, instead of somebody just saying, hey, where do I do this? And then having to go on the internet and look it up and hope they find the right thing. We put together the resources at ketamine.com, and we're doing a private beta trial that Lamar's in right now with a bunch of people who are going through the treatments, different doses, different prognosis that they have. And we are figuring out how to roll this out across the whole country. Because what happened for Warren and I was we were setting up to do this at clinics around the country. But when the pandemic hit, we realized people don't want to go into a clinic and sit around people with germs, and they don't want to get stuck with a needle. So if you can use a lozenge that goes under your tongue, lay in your own bed and be guided by a nurse over telemedicine, that is the ultimate solution. And we're working on making it cheap enough that anybody can access this opportunity. And that's ultimately the goal, is to, if we can help everybody to feel really good, then society is going to be better. We can figure out the environment and violence and all those kind of things. It's really easy to fix that if you're fixing it because people are expanding their consciousness and are more tuned in, more empathetic. So the idea is to get a critical mass of people. And I think Lamar crosses everybody over from, sports to pop culture. And what's amazing about Lamar is if this was any other person that the society watching it would think, well, I don't know, I don't really know them. Maybe something else happened. Maybe they, are wired that way. But people really feel like they know Lamar all over the world. They feel like they have a personal relationship. They've seen him so much in so many situations that they're just, when they see the movie, I have people immediately say, I think I need a ketamine treatment. A friend of Lamar, Nakia, she said her friend watched the movie and it ended, Nakia, and she said, I got to get my friend to do it. And that's like the total reaction we were going for in this movie. It's like so gratifying to hear that kind of thing. So check out ketamine.com if you want to know, the wheres and whens, but maybe I'll let Warren speak to that a little bit too, just about how ketamine, how to access it.
Yeah, again, ketamine saved my life 5 or 6 years ago, and I was fortunate enough to be able to pay for it. And Zappy and I have been working, consulting and advocating and running clinics and marketing for clinics in the ketamine space. And the truth of the matter is that it works really well in places like Manhattan and Beverly Hills and places where people have a lot of money, but it's just not fair. So during the course of this time, Zappy and I started a 501c3 called the Ketamine Fund, where we've been giving free treatments to veterans. But the goal the whole time, and the reason we formed that charitable organization, was to make this accessible to everyone. So like Zappy said, and when this pandemic hit, all of these people that we've helped treat over these last couple of years were calling us in a panic saying, what do we do? And that's when the light bulb went off. you can do this safely at home if you're under supervision, if you've had a consultation with a physician and you qualify for the treatment. So it brings the cost and the opportunity cost down by 90%. So now we're able to treat people that otherwise could never even come close to affording it. Hopefully one day we'll be able to have the ketamine fund be able to pay for people who can't afford anything for the treatment. And we'll have this ecosystem where anybody that needs treatment, if they can come in, they can pay what they can afford, and the ketamine fund can subsidize the rest. If people can't afford anything, the ketamine fund can come in and pay for the treatments for them on its own. And this is a huge triage for this society. I mean, ketamine is incredibly effective for anxiety, depression, and suicidal ideation, and it's legal here. And too many people can't access it. And, my mission has been, and I put myself at the center of letting everyone in the world call me and, I spend hours on the phone with people to tell them what ketamine is about. And now, we've been talking about this the whole time. Now we can say, just watch the film, look at it, go to KetaMD. There's a lot of FAQs, learn about it. And, it's pretty simple to access and it's highly effective. And if you look at the other modalities that are available, antidepressants, these SSRIs, those are and that's the first new treatment since the mid 80s, since Prozac. And that's the medication that's brought us here to this suicide epidemic and this mental health epidemic that was terrifying before the pandemic. And now the numbers that are coming out now, the trajectory of suicides and mental health issues are untenable, and they threaten the fabric of society in the Western world, in the world at large. And, we have a solution. We have the plant medicine solutions too. And we have all these other things that need to be studied that, we know the efficacy, but, the time is now to be able to access what's legal in ketamine and to really open the door for studying these other things like what Ismail's doing at MAPS and the organization, to really have the universities and the moneyed interests in this country allow us to study these things and allow us to give access to people that need them. People are dying in alarming proportions. If you haven't been affected by a suicide or an overdose, you're probably not living in America or Canada or in the Western world. But if you haven't been, you're very lucky. And I hope it doesn't land on your doorstep like it has for me. And I know Ishmael said it has for him. I'm sure it has for everyone. So hope everyone gets to access these things. I hope this movie pushes that forward.
Cool. And if anybody on the Facebook side has any questions, Adil's going to throw those questions to us. So you guys can ask those questions in the comments on Facebook. And Chase, let me cut back to you for a minute. And CBD and hemp lucid were played a role in this movie, and I think your experience with plants and particular hemp. This seems also like one of these things that it's trying to come out, and hopefully, between the movie pushing these things out, hopefully, hemp and CBD also get their day in the spotlight here.
Yeah, absolutely. So the cool thing about CBD and cannabis and the human body, our body is equipped with something called the endocannabinoid system. So every human being and mammal on Earth has a endocannabinoid system, and that system is responsible for, I like to think of it as the internet of the body. It allows for the brain and all of the other organ systems to communicate. Our bodies produce cannabinoids. So if anybody has ever experienced like a runner's high or anything like that, that is actually your body producing something called anandamide. So the human body and cannabis has a very synergistic relationship, and it's cool with what we're seeing with CBD. In my opinion, CBD is one of the most powerful molecules on Earth. It allows the connection for the mind and the body, and starts to really start the process of kind of waking people up. But it's also great for pain and inflammation. It's going to be as more research and more science starts to come out about it, it's going to be just like, it'll be in everybody's household, just like a multivitamin. And one thing that I'm really proud about with our company and what we've done, we really went after the genetics of the plant. So as we all know, genetics matter, and we searched all over the country for a group of people that had the best genetics, and their intent in growing the plant was aligned with our intent and purpose and our mission. And we've teamed up with them, and we've been a partner with them for the last 6 years. So Hemp Lucid has been around 6 years, and it was that was a great honor to be part of Lamar's regimen. So yeah.
And I know, like just recently when Lamar, you had a family member who was not
wasn't
feeling
feeling
well.
good. Chase looked out.
Yeah, so it's like it's like once you know these things, like Lamar gets a call from one of his relatives, aunt, was it aunt?
That was my cousin.
Cousin, and then he's like, Chase, can you here's the address, can you send some CBD? Just knowing that these things are going to help. These are things that we as a community of people who've used these medicines, and we have to be the ones to bring this information out, because it's not that there's a conspiracy that's holding these things back. It's just a lack of education. So the politicians don't really know about these plants and compounds. The medical system doesn't know about it. And we as a community, we do know about it. So we need to be the leadership, and, we need to bring these things to the forefront. And so before I cut to Ishmael, I just want to introduce one person over here who's been a critical part of this team, which is Kaya Roman. And I'm just going to have her duck her face in here for a second, because she literally pulled off the entire launch campaign of the movie and made certain that the movie happened. Yeah, I know she's doing it for Lamar, so I appreciate that. Ishmael, what from MAP's perspective and your own, what are the steps people can take to, find the right resources and figure out what they should do?
Yeah, I mean, I'll say a couple of things. Maybe first, I think being at a research, education, and harm reduction organization, I feel a little bit of an obligation to provide even more context about ketamine. Another cool thing about it is that it's off patent and off label, which means that no single company at this point can own kind of generic racemic ketamine. And the substance itself, like you mentioned, is super cheap. It's all over the world. It's easy to find because it's accessible as an anesthetic. I do want to note that although it is physically safe, it does come with psychological risks, especially for people with certain types of PTSD symptoms. So it is important as a person to do some of your own research and understand risk reduction, because there are people who use ketamine in detrimental ways and they need support too. So it's good to have it medically assessed, to have that oversight. The field of ketamine is expanding and rapidly changing. Ethical standards and infrastructure are still being built out and evaluated by medical institutions. So the movement is starting to expand to consider how to make the treatment affordable, like you said, and accessible to people without means. I'm super excited to hear about the fund. I think that one of the big barriers that comes up when we think about bringing these substances into the medical system, especially within the US and the way healthcare is distributed in the US, is like, we can have the coolest intervention possible, but because of the way healthcare is actually accessible, you could actually increase health disparity if it's not done in a way that's mindful and thoughtful about the economic realities that people are experiencing. So I think as we move toward legal access, we've been thinking a lot about these more kind of practical methods of like, well, what do you do when we're in an environment where people have to often pay for their own healthcare, especially for something like ketamine, because when it's the generic and off label, it's usually not covered by insurance. So there's a movement to get to that point. And I think that's something that, groups like you were talking about that are involved in advocacy could be thinking about, but there's definitely going to be an ongoing process to get to that point. So I think maybe what I'll share now is a couple updates around what's been going on politically, because I think that kind of feeds into your question around where there might be access and how people can find this. With MAPS, we just published our first round of phase 3 results in Nature Medicine. We were on the front page of the New York Times, I think last week, actually. So we're looking at a couple years away from MDMA, which for those that don't know is the active ingredient in the well-known club drug ecstasy, to be available as a treatment by prescription for people who are suffering with PTSD, and that's MDMA assisted therapy. So it kind of brings in the preparation and integration element that you were talking about earlier. We're super excited about those results. We're in the process of the second round of phase 3 research now, and hopefully looking at, a couple years before that's actually available by prescription. Maybe some people heard, if you've been following the news, there was a lot of big news in Oregon coming out last November. Measure 109 passed, which created legal access to psilocybin services. So in a couple years, I'm actually involved on a subcommittee of the board that was put together to start looking at what legal regulated use of psilocybin in Oregon would look like. Measure 110 also passed, which actually fully decriminalized the personal use and possession of all drugs, which is a really important step to transition away from the failed war on drugs, which itself is a cause of trauma for a number of people in communities. So we're kind of not just looking at the acute impacts of the war on drugs, but also kind of these secondary effects and these more subtle effects that actually create trauma that we then have to deal with in the long run. And maybe lastly, I'll share that legislators, because of that news in Oregon, after November, legislators and advocates in probably almost a dozen states reached out to MAPS and a lot of other orgs to think about what the process of decriminalizing and legalizing these substances, because people can see the benefits, people can see how ridiculous it is that people are being incarcerated and being policed for what they're putting in their own bodies. So I'm really excited about a couple bills. One is SB 519 in California, which would decriminalize the personal use and possession of many psychedelic substances, including ketamine, ibogaine, and DMT, which is the active ingredient in ayahuasca. That just made it onto the California Senate floor. It's going to get voted on at some time in the next 2 weeks. And another exciting update is House Bill 1802 in Texas, which would direct a Texas university to conduct a clinical study of psilocybin in a partnership with a VA Veterans Affairs hospital. So there's a good chance that's going to get through. And what we're seeing now is this rapid movement where they're like, okay, there's things going through the medical process. That's really great. That's going to give us the oversight, quality control that we need to make sure that people are doing it safely. And simultaneously, there's these moves to reduce criminal penalties and create legal regulated access outside of those means, because we don't necessarily want a free-for-all, but we don't want people going to jail for seeking help either. So we're trying to find this balance among society of these different ways, seeing if they can coexist.
Amazing. I'm going to take a question from Facebook. The question is,
so there's a question here about, for Lamar, what kind of daily practices do you use in your healing journey? Like yoga, breath work, meditation, how do they help you?
A lot of meditation, of course, prayer every day, and make sure I see some sunlight, and working out. Working out always helps me.
that's a great regimen. I just want to comment a little bit about why we chose, you saw the formula in the movie, ketamine plus plant medicine plus daily practice equals conscious transformation. And I just wanted to speak to, what I do, as a psychedelic concierge, is that people come to me and say, I like a concierge at a hotel. I will ask them about, like a concierge would, what kind of food do you want? Do you like music? Do you like wine? And then make a recommendation of where to go. And so I sat with Lamar originally, talked to him about some of the traumas that he'd gone through, some of the things in his life and what his intent was. And it was clear that that was about getting mentally and physically better and being his best self, as he calls it, like the Mamba mentality, to always be your best self. And so, I realized that ketamine would be the easiest one because you could just go into a doctor's office, FDA approved. I went and talked to his family, his friends, and I kind of told him exactly what these things were and why I thought it would be of benefit. And after Lamar trusted me enough, he was willing to do it and had a great experience, his first psychedelic experience of doing the ketamine. And then after he had done a few treatments with the best doctors in the country, I said to him, you have an opportunity, given your addiction profile, to go down to Mexico. Unfortunately, you're going to have to go to Mexico because it's not legal here, which is a problem. But let's go down to Mexico. Let's do this iboga. This is an African root. You're an African-American guy. You're probably supposed to have had some of this plant medicine throughout your life, but you've been cut off from it culturally. So why don't you take this leap. It's shown to do amazing things on addiction and depression. And so Lamar did that. And I have to say, you see in the movie, but it was really shocking because 48 hours after his ibogaine experience, he said, I feel so good mentally and physically. I think I can make a comeback in professional basketball. And we were all like, wow, that's incredible. Holy shit. But little did we know, Lamar just, went to the gym, started training, self-motivated. And several months later, he winds up playing in a professional tournament in Dubai. What was that like, Lamar, when you stepped back out on the court and had that moment for yourself?
That was like a proud moment. It was like a baby's first time walking. Shit. Came back from the gutter. I had to get it from the mud. I was proud. Should have been an SB moment for myself.
Yeah.
But it was an SB moment for myself.
Yeah. I have a feeling Lamar is probably going to get an SB for humanitarian, duties that he's done, because this is way beyond what most people would do. And
just giving my testimony.
Yeah. And, Lamar has a gift for, being able to, in his own way, communicate really difficult things in a sort of succinct way that everybody, regardless of whether they, like basketball or like, psychedelics or like anything, it makes sense to everybody. And I think, that came through in the movie for sure. And, I do hope that this leads to some other, thought leaders and influencers, Prince Harry and, Michelle Obama and all these cool people who, we know they're amazing people, but we also know that they're probably suffering just like all of us, that if they could have this experience.
Prince Harry, he probably can use a ketamine treatment.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe I might try to hit him up on the DM.
Nice. We got a DM going out. I mean, that's what this is all about, and being able to tell them, hey, watch the movie, that you don't have to sit down with anybody. You don't have to read anything. Just watch the movie and it's going to make complete sense.
You got a question from the audience here.
One more question here.
What's the difference between like the kind of ketamine that Lamar used and people just using ketamine recreationally?
I'll let Zappy.
Okay. So that's a good question. What's the difference between recreational street ketamine and medical ketamine? And so the answer is that they're both the same molecule, but what's happening with the recreational is that people are getting it in a powdered form and they're snorting it up their nose, which is hitting opiate receptors, unnecessarily hitting opiate receptors in their brain. And you have to take a very high amount to just get a small dose because of the bioavailability. So that means that people are snorting high doses. They're not getting a medical benefit necessarily. And these days, with whatever you could get, whatever you could get on the street, who knows what's in that? So people are snorting, fentanyl and all kinds of things thinking they're using ketamine. And when you use medical ketamine, this is a specific dose. The bioavailability is taken into account. And when you get that medicine in your body, it is causing you to have, it's a low dose. So it's causing you to have a dissociative experience, because that's the power of ketamine, is that it's a dissociative. It's not a hallucinogenic, meaning the walls aren't melting and crazy things happening. What it's doing is it's dissociating your left and right brain and allowing them to communicate in a way that is free without your ego getting involved. So for everybody, it's a really important opportunity, as long as they're cleared medically, they don't have high blood pressure that's uncontrolled or glaucoma. But these days, after the pandemic, with everybody having some level of PTSD, we're finding that more and more people could benefit from ketamine in a medical setting. Another question. Okay.
How long does the effect last? Does the healing maintain over time, or does it wear off?
So Warren, maybe you want to touch on the ketamine and the ibogaine, and Chase, how long have you felt the effects, and how long is that?
Well, for everybody, it's different. It's not a silver bullet, unfortunately. I wish it was. I wish I could tell people it was, but, people generally go through that protocol of 6 treatments over the course of 2 to 3 weeks. And then you'll wait for an interval of, having some reduction in some of the symptoms of depression or anxiety or OCD or bulimia or trauma. And then if they start creeping back in, you can go in for a booster, and you can expect that interval to repeat for about a year and then start to extend. And hopefully after 2 or 3 years, you would need ketamine much less frequently. And also the introduction of daily practices while you're in the middle of these sessions. And we believe in stuff like life coaching, and rather than regressing and talking about your past, while you have this neuroplasticity, starting to think about how I can create these positive feedback loops, and those extend the interval of how long the ketamine's working for. In terms of ibogaine, I would just say that integration is crucial, especially if you're using ibogaine for opioid addiction. There's groups like Universal Ibogaine, which is building this huge infrastructure to build the ecosystem around ibogaine, including integration when we get back. So I just want to keep that short. I know the hour's running out, so I just wanted to give it to Zappy back to wrap up and say thank you, and I'll keep my mouth shut from here on in. Thanks.
Yeah, no, thank everybody for being on this panel. You guys are, on the forefront and really making a difference in this revolution. So I definitely salute you. And then, to Lamar, I'm like super excited to see what the future brings. And I think, I could imagine him coaching at any level in basketball, because he is inspirational, and even in the worst moment, he's going to have something funny to say. So I could see him transferring that, and whether that's coaching people to be comfortable with psychedelics or coaching in basketball, I leave that to you, Lamar. But thank you for being so brave and doing this. You're already literally saving people's lives.
No, I appreciate you, Zappy, and I want to thank you for helping me help myself.
Cool. All right. Thank you, everybody. Enjoy.
Later.
Thanks so much, y'all.
Bye, guys. Thanks.